recently together on The Shop, which is LeBron's show on HBO. Now, one of the things that came up took us back to 2017 when LeBron James was talking about players being the greatest of all time. And he said, my only argument with a football player being the greatest of all time is they only play one side of the floor. Yes, Brady is unbelievable. He's the greatest quarterback I've ever seen, but he affects the game one way. I'm not saying he's not great. He's the greatest football player of all time. Well, Tom Brady never forgets anything. So this came up when he was on The Shop last week, and he said, it just depends what style you like. You could say, well, you're maybe the most accomplished. I would say, okay, yeah, I've won a lot of games, Super Bowls and so forth. You can't do everyone else's job. I can't block, tackle, run, catch. I sure as hell can't run, but I can throw the bleep out of the ball. So just let me do that, and let me do it really well. So let's talk a little bit about this here. We bring in a couple of people representing a couple of different sports. Big Perk gets up with us this morning to join Neek and Rob Ninkovich. And so let me start there. Is LeBron James basically saying, Big Perk, that a football player can't be, unless we're going to go back to Chuck Bednarik, can't be the greatest player of all time in sports? Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree, Greeny. And look, you know, I hate to come on here and start any type of confusion this morning, but that's what I do, and I don't care, okay? At the end of the day, he's right. And look, Tom Brady admitted it himself. And it's a sad world for all the football players that are in the business. I know Swagoo is mad. I know Ryan Clark is very disappointed because I came on here time and time again trying to preach the gospel to them about who's the greatest between the two. I even had to have this conversation with a lot of other fellas. But when you talk about Tom Brady, look, in my eyes, he's the greatest quarterback of all time, and there's no debate. But when you talk about the greatest player, where a guy that has to play offense and defense, you got to run up and down the floor. You got to be able to have a certain level of skills. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Greeny, look, it's a great day for Big Perk. It's a bad day for Foxworth right now. I know he's very disappointed.
Ooh, how about that, Foxworth?
Oh, he's calling me out. We're on First Take together later on ESPN2, so we can get it started right now. The problem with LeBron James' logic, and I agree with him, he's right. But the problem with that is then you end up at individual sports because LeBron still has teammates. So if you want to go there and say the fact that Tom Brady has to rely on people, LeBron, yes, relies on fewer people. So maybe he's greater than Tom Brady, but he ain't better than Simone Biles. He ain't better than Serena Williams. They don't got no teammates. Kyrie Irving never hit a game-winning shot for Serena Williams, not once.
Here we go, a typical football player again, changing the narrative and not staying on what we're talking about. Look, we already know when it comes down to boxing, when it comes down to tennis, when it comes down to golf, that's your legacy is built on championships. It's an individual sport. I'm not going there. We're talking about football and basketball.
Okay, football and basketball. LeBron James is better basketball player than Tom Brady is a football player. But Tom Brady is the best at his sport of all time. There is no conversation. So relative to all the other quarterbacks or all the other football players in the history of football, you cannot put anybody on Tom Brady's level. Can you say the same thing about LeBron James? I think LeBron James is great, but I'm pretty sure that, what are we, like 50-50? Some people would say probably 80-20. Most people would say that Jordan is the greatest of all time. So LeBron James isn't even the consensus greatest of all time in his sport. So he need to stop barking up this Tom Brady tree, and you need to stop barking up this tree before you catch a L, a pre-first take L. You are catching one right now.
Let me get Rob Ninkovich in, who's in the happiest place on earth right now. Ninkovich is in Disney World this morning. He's in the Beast Castle. Well, I don't want to try and get you involved in an argument here this morning, but what do you think?
Well, I think it's 95 degrees outside, and I got 3 kids, so this is probably the best time I'm going to have right now sitting in the Beast Library right now. But I would say that of both players, you could say Tom Brady or LeBron, there's a lot of haters out there on both sides. So you're going to have plenty of people that are like, oh no, Tom Brady's unathletic, but he is the best quarterback in my eyes of all time. And then there's a lot of people that hate on LeBron. You know, they say, oh, he's not the best of all time because Jordan was better. You're going to have the 50-50 split, yada, yada, yada. They say, oh, he's a flopper. He lays on the ground too long, which, I mean, he might. If he played football, he'd have a hard time getting up. But anyway, I'm not getting into the physical side of things. I'm just going to say Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time, and the whole athlete thing goes out the window because they are both on teams. And if it was an individual sport, I think it'd be different.
Yeah.
Greeny, you know what I have a problem with? See, football players, right? Former NFL players and guys that still play in the NFL, they have a problem with calling basketball players soft. You know why? For the simple reason that they first love was they actually wanted to be a basketball player. They just wasn't skilled enough to play the game. So they go-to move is saying, oh, you guys are soft. You guys flop. We played through pain. We could play through a torn ACL while y'all sitting on the sideline. So at the end of the day, I already get it. They always go back to this soft word because at the end of the day, their first love was basketball. They just wasn't skilled enough.
Park, let me just tell you a quick story. I grew up in South Holland, Illinois. Thornwood was right across the street. That's where my sister went to school. Eddie Curry was the Mr. All-American, okay? When I walked in the gym, he was 7 foot tall. I looked up, I said, well, I don't think I'm going to play basketball. He was way bigger than me. So there's a little thing called vertically challenged. That's why I played football, because at 6'3", I was not a good point guard. I had no left hand, okay?
Dominique, would you rather, if you could have lived your life over again and been an NBA player, would you rather have played basketball than football?
Absolutely. Perk's words, they cut deep. They hurt. They cut deep. But he's right. I mean, who wouldn't? Like, come on. Being a star in the NBA seems, to me, from a distance, to be a lot easier and a lot more fun and a lot less painful. And I wouldn't call any basketball players soft. I certainly wouldn't. They might do a lot of acting and flopping on the court, but I've been in some bad places with some basketball players, and they helped me get out. So I'm not calling anybody soft.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Again, those two guys that are in a little bit of trouble here. The Hawks are in some, the Clippers are in even more. So let's talk about their stars and what they need to do. Trae Young will be getting treatment, I have no doubt, nonstop between now and tomorrow night's Game 4. Give me a sense of what his stat sheet is going to have to look like tomorrow night for the Hawks to even this up.
I think he's got to not get to 35, but he's also got to get the 11 assists. And that's what I thought the Bucks did a good job of, was they took away the assist by going with that small lineup. But it's not just making shots. It's not just the floater when he shoots it. It's the plays he makes for others that basically are more inclusive and get other guys involved in the game. So Young's got to have like a 30, 35, and 11 game. When he does, that's obviously the Hawks are tough to beat. Can he do that on a bum ankle? I'm not sure.
All right, it is so brutal that happened last night in a postseason that has been filled with all of these injuries, some of which might be fatigue related, and that obviously is just the ultimate fluke moment, and it would be a terrible shame if it winds up really impacting the outcome. In the meantime, the Clippers trying to stave off elimination tonight on the road at Phoenix in that Game 5. Their star, Paul George, he's done a lot in this series. What does he have to do tonight for the Clippers to stay alive?
He's got to go Kevin Durant. That's what he's got to do. He's got to go Kevin Durant. He's got to probably drop 40, all right, impact the game, rebound in the basketball, take over the game in the fourth quarter. That's what he's got to do. And Reggie Jackson's got to complement that with like a 25-point game. Those two guys have got to do basically what Giannis and Middleton did yesterday. They've got to dominate the game down the stretch. Now, look, Paul George has been terrific. And then in the big moment, he's got to make a big play. You know, I'm sure he's looking back and saying, what about those 2 free throws? He's had a great playoff. But when the game's on the line and you're Paul George and you've had playoff P and not so playoff P, you've got to make those plays. But he's got to drop 40. He's got to go Kevin Durant. But I think Reggie Jackson's got to compliment him, because when Jackson's good, the Clippers have got a Robin to, obviously, Paul George's Batman.
Outstanding work all morning long, Uncle Seth. Thanks a million for getting up with us as always, and we will see what Paul George is able to do.